What's going on, guys? My name is Ted. Welcome to another FPL video ahead of a busy game week, double game week 32. Quite a lot of us playing our free hit, so this will be free hit centered analysis looking at the 10 double game week teams that play in 32. Not going to focus on the other 10 who have single game weeks because the ceilings and the floors for these double game week players are so much higher, and I see tremendous value in filling our teams with as many double game weeks players as possible. I'm going to look at forwards, midfielders and defenders, and we'll start with the forwards. So the lines that you can see on this graph represent the quality of the chances that these forwards typically get, and the little dots represent the number of shots that they're expected to have in this game week, which is represented by threat points here. We can see right off the bat that Aguero is right up there for most. He is having the highest quality chances and he's having the most shots out of all of forwards. So enough said, he's an absolute shoo-in for our free hit squads. Rashford, Lukaku, interesting prospects. I think Rashford's number of shots has been subdued recently, with Lukaku actually playing number 9, and I think Pogba playing in a deeper role with Matic being out. I would expect the output from Rashford to significantly increase now that Lukaku has been mentioned that he might be out for the next couple of weeks coming back from injury. So Rashford seems like the key option for our double game week free hit sides. Kane is an interesting one. He's quite expensive. He's got Liverpool and he's got Palace in his new stadium. There's two ways of looking at that. It could be positive or negative. Gives him the incentive to really go at that Palace game and get that coveted first goal in the new stadium. Or it might hinder him. Teams in the past playing in new stadiums haven't really felt at home. I remember when Arsenal played at the Emirates, they drew 1-1 against Aston Villa. It wasn't a great game, and I think Spurs might suffer the same fate against Palace. It's a tough game, nevertheless. Against Palace, they're not defensive pushovers. So trusting Kane in that environment might not be tremendously advisable. He is very expensive as well, so possibly someone to ignore or take a punt on. And why not take a punt on one of the best strikers in the Premier League? I think one of the other options that is being overlooked is Higuain. Quietly, they're having quite a few shots. His quality might not be as high as some of the other forwards, but I think he's definitely an option to look at this game week 32. Not that popular because I think quite a lot of the fantasy managers on Twitter are opting for Hazard and a double Chelsea defence. So he could be a bit of a differential in that respect. And I think against Brighton and Cardiff, you've got some really decent fixtures to attack. And this could be a chance for Chelsea to overturn their attacking form recently and get a tremendous amount of goals in those fixtures. So Higuain's got some great stats, and I would fully expect him to convert them if he gets some decent chances. Jimenez is another option. The problem with Jimenez is that he's been on international duty, which isn't necessarily a bad thing because he actually was given a rest in the second game. The problem I have is with rotation ahead of the FA Cup semi-final. He's got Burnley away first. He'll be nice and fresh for that, but then he might get rotated in the Man U match, which means he only have one fixture, and that I'm not overly enamoured with that prospect. He still could do very well. He's had 8 attacking returns in the last 8 game weeks, which just shows his consistency over the entire season as an excellent FPL asset. But I think I'm going to ignore Jimenez just this once. The prospect of that one fixture doesn't fill me with confidence, and I think there are better options out there that will definitely play 2 games. Similarly with Deeney, he's very likely to get rotated ahead of that FA Cup semi-final, and the difficulty with Watford is that they have their difficult game first against Man United, and then they'll be rested against Fulham ahead of the FA Cup semi-final, which is the Plum game. So I would stay away from Watford assets if you're worried about rotation. Batshuayi and Zaha, not great stats, and I think Zaha is struggling back from injury. So all in all, I think I might avoid the Crystal Palace attack, unless I'm lacking in budget, in which case I might opt for something like Milivojevic. But his penalty taking prospect is directly linked with Zaha's trickery in the penalty area, so that relies on him actually being fit and available. Well, let's look at the total points that they're forecasted to have this game week. Aguero right at the top, 14.9. That just shows what an excellent option he is this week. I think 99% of free hit teams are going to have Aguero in. But surprisingly, next down is Higuain on 12.6. And I think people are overlooking him. So he would be my, not differential pick, but someone that maybe is being overlooked. I think he's a really good option. Lukaku next down 10.9, but I think we can rule him out because he's been reported to be out for the next 2 weeks with that foot injury. Kane similarly 10.9, but don't have a tremendous amount of confidence in Kane, but that's just my opinion. I think he could do well, but equally he could not do well. But that's up to you guys to decide. I think Rashford is possibly the one that I will opt for. He's predicted to have 9.1 points, but I think that's using historical stats in the last 6 game weeks where his output has been subdued, with dynamics of the team such as Matic being out, Lukaku playing number 9 is a major aspect that I would expect to change going forward. Rashford being a key option for me. If I had to choose 3 of these forwards, it would probably be Aguero, Higuain and Rashford. The other 5 at the bottom don't really fill me with too much confidence unless you've got budget problems, in which case you might take a punt on Raul Jimenez or the likes of Glenn Murray for Brighton. So let's have a look at the midfielders now. I've broken these down into premium and budget sections. Starting with the goals and threat for these premium midfielders, Sterling really looking like an excellent asset, and he's not just been in good form for City, he's been in good form for England. So again, I think he's like Aguero, everyone's going to have Sterling. The trickery is the third City asset. I think we all have to triple up on City. So whether it's another attacking asset or a defensive asset, we have to decide. David Silva here, pulling his weight amongst these premium options, and someone else who might be overlooked. There's also Bernardo Silva, which we'll come to later in the budget section, but David Silva is displaying a very decent case for himself to be included in our squads. Hazard, interestingly, he's having a fair amount of shots, but the quality of those shots are quite low, which means that the steepness of his line is quite low. So that was emphasised by his shot, his goal a couple of game weeks ago, which was outside the box, and it was I think it was against Wolves. It was a fantastic shot, but how many of those are going to go in? If he continues to have loads of shots like that, it doesn't fill me with a tremendous amount of confidence. But still, he's expected to score more than the likes of Son, Ali, Eriksen and Pogba. But that it comes with a caveat. I think Pogba's output has been subdued by playing in a deeper role with Matic being out. Also, this analysis doesn't include penalties, so if Pogba gets a penalty, that instantly increases his potential. The interesting one, I think, for me is Son, and in the last sort of 3 games he's played for Spurs, he's been a bit fatigued, and I think I saw a bit of his South Korean match against Bolivia, I think it was, and he looked very lively. So maybe that fatigue is slightly over, and he could be back to his best. We'll just have to see, and I think we'll have to take a punt on that because his attacking stats at the moment don't fill me with tremendous amount of confidence. Let's move on to the creativity side of things. Sterling and David Silva are up there once again, displaying who the best options are in terms of the midfielder premium category. Hazard up there again. I think Hazard is making a case for himself to be included as well. The Spurs lot and Pogba really bringing up the rear. But if I'd have to opt for a couple of them, it would be Son and Pogba. I don't think Eriksen and Ali really have the extenuating circumstances or the stats to fill me with confidence about picking them for my side. David Silva, I think, is a really interesting option. But if we don't have the budget to pick those players, I think let's look at some of the cheaper options. Deulofeu here, having the highest quality chances typically, but not having as many shots as the likes of Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva having a tremendous amount of shots and fair amount of quality chances. The problem with the likes of Pedro and Willian is the rotation. I think Sarri likes to rotate them in the same position, so I would expect Pedro to get one game, Willian to get one game. Martial could be a really interesting option for this game week, with Rashford going back to number 9 if Lukaku is out. They need someone to facilitate that left wing spot, but that could be Sanchez, it could be Martial. Again, we don't know, and he hasn't had a tremendous amount of form recently, so again, that seems like a bit of a punt. Diego Jota, similar reasons for Jimenez. He might be playing in that Burnley match, but then maybe he will be rotated for that Man United match ahead of the FA Cup semi-final. So the prospect of one fixture isn't too appealing for those Wolves assets, which makes me feel like I might avoid them. Milivojevic at the bottom there. He's not having a tremendous amount of shots, and the quality of those shots is really low. So I think you're really picking Milivojevic for his penalty appeal, and that really goes hand in hand with Saha's fitness. So I would keep an eye out for that in the press conferences. But the problem is, it doesn't really feel right picking a player just for penalties, although he has had a tremendous amount in recent weeks, so he could be a decent option, and we know he's going to play both matches. He's played every single minute for Palace this season. Deulofeu as the really budget option, if you're prepared to risk his rotation against Fulham ahead of that FA Cup semi-final, then he seems like the best option under 6 million, so it would have to be him, but I would be just heavily caveating that the rotation could strike. Let's have a look at their creativity. Once again, Bernardo Silva at the top there. Deulofeu, really not creative. He's really more of a threatening midfielder. We've already mentioned Pedro and Willian. That rotation could strike. Martial is an interesting option. Jota, really not that creative. Milivojevic, pretty creative actually, but the quality of those chances that he creates for his teammates isn't that high. So once again, you're only picking Milivojevic for his penalty appeal. Out of all of them, Bernardo Silva is a standout option, but it really depends on the combination of City players that you choose for this game week. Let's have a look at the total points forecasted for these. Top of the pops, really, City lot, Sterling, Silva, Bernardo Silva, 17, 15, 13.3. Sterling is equivalent to Aguero, I think, 17 points versus 15 odd points. I think those points differences is merely because he's a midfielder and he gets clean sheet points and an extra point for a goal. So Aguero and Sterling, I think everyone's going to have them this game week. And then the two Silvers are really interesting options, and I think you can pick both of them with relative comfort that they're going to play one game at least, and you'd hope the second game, but De Bruyne is coming back. I don't know if he's fit enough to play in the next couple of games, but Pep really does like the Silvers. He really likes Bernardo Silva especially. He has lots of glowing things to say. So I think either of those could be really good options if you fancy a triple up in attack for City. Fourth in the predicted points is Hazard, and I think he really is making a case for our sides. He's got some plum fixtures, Brighton and Cardiff. So I think quite a lot of people will pick Hazard. And then the rest of that list is really a mixed bag. I think some of the more expensive options, Son and Pogba, are more of the standout ones. I expect their output to increase through extenuating circumstances, fatigue, and Pogba's been playing out of position. I think Milivojevic you can pick for his penalties if you've got the budget, and Deulofeu you can pick if you haven't got 6 million to spend on a midfielder. So let's move on to defenders and their clean sheet probability. And then I think this is a really interesting graph. Man City up there, 65% clean sheet probability for the next couple of games. So that's per game. So they're really, really likely to get clean sheets against Fulham and Cardiff. But the problem is that you'd want those attacking assets. So it really depends on whether you want to hedge your bets. Go for 2 attacking City assets in Sterling and Aguero, and then maybe a Laporte or an Edison to really firm up that clean sheet potential, and maybe even attacking in return from the likes of Laporte, or even a cheeky assist from Edison. We've seen him do it. But I think the thing that really strikes me about this graph is the Chelsea and Man United clean sheet potential isn't as high as we'd expect with the good fixtures that they have, and this has been adjusted to account for that. Spurs as well, not very high on the clean sheet probability. So we've gone through these attacking options and we've suggested to go for the premium ones as the best. So it seems sensible to me that we go for 7 attacking options from the premium side of things, and maybe look for some budget defenders that have reasonable clean sheet options. Maybe not even worry about some of the attacking potential, but if that is there, then that's a great bonus. Let's have a look at the individual players in some of these teams with some of the best attacking potential, and match those to some of the teams that have a fair amount of clean sheet potential. So look at defenders' goals and their threat so far, but I think it's quite difficult to predict goals for defenders. Just inherently, it's quite volatile. They only go up for corners, or they might be free kicks, or in Jeffrey Schlupp's case, an out-of-position player, he offers the most goal threat. So a really interesting option, Jeffrey Schlupp. I think quite a lot of people on Twitter, I know, are picking him as that out-of-position Crystal Palace option. I already mentioned that Palace options could be decent against Spurs in that almost neutral ground, but they've got Huddersfield at home first, and you'd expect clean sheet points there, and he's got an additional goal threat to add to his appeal. I think quite a lot of people will choose him. Willy Bolly is also a really interesting option, even though we're worried about Wolves' rotation. The likes of Doherty might fall into that as well. I don't think centre defenders really fall into that, so Willy Bolly could play both games and be quite a good option. He's got a bit of goal threat as well from corners, so if you're looking for someone cheap, I think he's 4.5 million, then he might be one to go for. Out of the Chelsea 2, Luis Azpilicueta, it seems like Luis has more of the goal threat. He's on free kicks as well. Just not 100% sure on his whether he's 100% to start both matches. I know that Christensen and Rudiger are also in the mix, but I think Luis is first choice. It's just whether his foot injury will keep him out or not. I don't think it's a problem. I think he will play both games, but we know 100% Azpilicueta, barring any injury, is nailed on to start. Man United defensive options are really interesting. We've seen that their clean sheet probability isn't that great. So we're looking for attacking potential as well. Luke Shaw, for me, is on 9 yellow cards. So if he gets booked in that first match and then rested in the second, then that would be really frustrating if anyone picked him. So that immediately rules him out for me. Ashley Young is an interesting option. He's a bit more expensive, I think 5.7 million to 5.1 for sure. He does have a mean sort of delivery into the box, so I think he could be an interesting one. He could get an assist. But you've got Lindelof as well, who's 5.1, and he has a bit of bit of goal threat. Even those two aren't on this graph, but Lindelof's just had his baby. Not 100% sure whether his mind will be focused on that, whether he'll be fit to play. My guess would be that he will be available and ready to play. So he could be a really decent option, but the fact that he doesn't appear on this goal threat graph suggests that possibly that attacking threat isn't there, and we'll just rely on his clean sheet points. Laporte there at the top, it shows that he has some really decent quality chances, but I think most of the points for Laporte will come from his excellent clean sheet potential. Let's move on to their creativity, which is inherent in defenders, probably more likely outputs, crosses into the box, or from free kicks if they're on them, like Trippier perhaps, or Louise. Trippier, unsurprisingly, creates a huge amount of chances, but his quality is quite low, so he's actually not predicted to score as many points as Shaw. I think very, very similar points. And then it's really a mixed bag. I think Louise is at the top for quality, but very underwhelming from this selection of players. So I think we've got to really focus on some of these clean sheet potentials, and some of these maybe lower cost players such as Schlupp or Duffy or maybe Willy Bolly can be really decent options for us, allowing us budget to really attack the midfielders in the forward lines, and that could be a really effective strategy for this double game week. So let's have a look at the final total points that we're expected to see. Laporte at the top there, 11 points. And if you compare that to some of the City assets that we've seen in the midfielders and the forward slots, that doesn't compare too greatly. And the points here from Laporte down to Doherty don't differ that much. So that even further emphasises that perhaps we can look for more differential options in the defensive line. And maybe the point swings won't be too great, and maybe we can have a bit more confidence about going for some cheaper options in defence. Some decent options there. I think Jeffrey Schlupp everyone will have. Willy Bolly, it possibly a bit overlooked, and maybe a David Luiz or an Azpilicueta, but I'm not 100% sure about doubling up on some of these assets, from the fact that the clean sheet probability for Chelsea and Man United isn't really as high as we expected. So if you're looking to double up with Chelsea or Man United, I'd maybe think again and possibly turn your attention to doubling up in attack instead. I think that could be a more of an effective strategy. Maybe look for some more cheaper options in defence. Okay, guys. I think probably one more thing to mention is the goalkeepers. I haven't really touched on this in the analysis, but I think the goalkeepers will really depend on the options that you choose as in your outfield players. I would go for the cheapest bench possible, because the likelihood is that if you choose a double game week player who has two fixtures, the likelihood is he will play in one of them, and then the likelihood of the bench coming into play is very, very, very slim. So I would fill it up with those 3.8 million defenders and the 4.2 mids, and I think there's Colin Quaynor up there with a 4.3 forward. So make use of that. The goalkeepers, if you've got a spare Chelsea, Man United or Man City slot, then I would put Kepa, De Gea or Edison in there. Otherwise, opt for someone like Foster, who I think won't get rotated, or maybe Matt Ryan is another decent option. I think stay away from Guaita at Crystal Palace, because Hennessy is hovering around, and we've seen Roy Hodgson play around with some of those goalkeeper options, so I would stick away from that. I put someone in goal who you know is going to play both games, and I think that goes to show. You could follow that advice for every one of your players you pick in your free hit squad. Okay, guys, I think that is it. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. If you've got any feedback, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel. And I'll look forward to seeing you guys next time. Okay, best of luck for the game week. Cheers, guys.